Hello and welcome to No Veto Video. I'm Carson.
And I'm Catherine, and we're happy to have you guys along with us as we're responding to the 2015 film The Dressmaker, directed by Jocelyn Moorhouse, starring Kate Winslet, Liam Hemsworth, Judy Davis, and Hugo Weaving.
The Dressmaker tells the tale of a woman who comes back to her hometown to learn more about who she really is.
Cryptic.
Trying to avoid spoilers. It's kind of a new movie.
And so just to let you guys know, we have decided that a discussion of this film isn't really complete without talking about its fifth act. So we'll let everybody know, and there'll be a visual on the screen to just warn you ahead of time when we are going to get into spoiler territory. So until then, hopefully we'll try and steer clear of it. Amazon Prime started showing me like previews of this movie, and I was intrigued by it enough. I love textile art, and there was just enough of this. It's like I don't know what this film might be. I thought about what this is really a perfect no veto video pick, because there's nothing at stake, and though it's worth going out on a limb for, and I'm glad we did.
One thing I noticed on this, this was not as predictable as many movies I've seen with you recently, in that I didn't really know what to make of a lot of the characters early on. I didn't know if they were sympathetic characters, if they were antagonists, if they might be sympathetic antagonists. You really have to watch it unfold. You can't easily guess about many of the people.
And I actually had the opposite reaction, but it didn't make me enjoy the film less. Like sometimes a telegraphed kind of, at one point the characters are in the presence of someone performing a scene from Gilbert and Sullivan's The Mikado, which kind of has, for me, like it brushes up against kabuki, and kabuki often gets denigrated in Western theater circles because it's considered, overly broad, and you kind of know where everybody is as soon as the play gets started, because it's, this repetition of a set canon of work, and and indications by makeup, and yet there's something really very pleasurable about watching a thing is unfold. And that was for me from the moment the character stepped off the bus, and like just that character introduction of the moment of like her stepping onto the ground, her looking around, and even the way she sort of plunked her sewing machine down, I was like, okay, I know who you are. You're the gunslinger.
Yeah.
You were having a very different reaction.
When she first stepped off the train, set the bag down, and the words that came out of her mouth, I asked you, is this going to be a female American version of Desperado?
Well, no, that's when I said she was the gunslinger. Yeah. You said she looks like someone who's about to get murdered.
Yeah, in that she looked like she was in the wrong place at the wrong time, which she ultimately, in a way, was. And
yet, I don't know. So, then you begin to slowly meet the characters of this town, and all of the different people, and watching the central character, the Tilly character, piece together the mystery that's at the heart of the plot is one thing, but also sort of watching these interactions, particularly for her and for her mother, and watching somebody sort of come back to themselves was really a lot of fun. And I think Judy Davis, who plays the mother character, must have just had a tremendously fun time playing this, because she is giving it all it's worth, and yet, is clearly enjoying it very much.
It was interesting to see how her story came back to her, the parts that she'd forgotten, as different characters filled in different bits and pieces, and sometimes contradictory events.
You know, and you actually you get the first glimpses of what'll ultimately be a flashback over the opening credits, along interspersed with these, I'm going to say drone footage because that's what I imagine they are, but of aerial shots of the landscape, and the landscape to me looked like fabric. Like the rows and the fields, the rows of wheat and the rows of sorghum and the rows of, like, it looked kind of like wool or corduroy, and so there was this idea of like through fabric this story will come together, and it was just it was a visual touch that was a nice sort of nod to where we were headed for the rest of the movie.
A lot of the visuals were pretty unique. The silo that comes up a few times, some of the shots from looking either up at it or down from it, a lot of good angles.
Well, you know, and here's the thing, there are a couple of, like, where they do establishing shots of these silos up against the, like, the horizon line. Yeah. But for me, I kept going, like, there's no castle in this town. Like, it almost looks like a manor house, like, set up away from the town, and it kept kind of throwing me for a loop where I'm like, wait a minute. Like, what is that? What is that building? Is that the town hall? Is that the... And it's like, oh, wait, no, it's the silos. It's the silos. And they do kind of loom, I think is a good word for it.
Yeah.
I was most struck, as far as visually goes, by these dead trees.
Yeah, I have no idea what kind of trees they are.
I don't either. They're, but there's just these sort of ghostly white trunks of trees in the schoolyard. And
very stocky trees, too.
But as it turns out, that is its own sort of bit of foreshadowing. Or post-shadowing? Anyway, the filmmakers clearly want our eyes to be caught by that. And that's a good thing. There were many eye-catching things in this film, and for me, mostly it was the dresses. Just the most decadent kind of fashion of the 1950s. You know, sort of Dior-inspired, like really high-line stuff, and interestingly juxtaposed by putting it on these people in the middle of like what looks like otherwise a Dorothea Lange picture of like Depression worker, like of the Dust Bowl, you know, like she is the photographer of the Dust Bowl. So it's like, picture Dorothea Lange's landscapes with like Vogue people in it, and it just doesn't quite work. But it does because of the sort of mules and horse harnesses kind of effect.
Not just the dresses either, but the fabrics themselves before they were made into clothing were just really beautiful.
Yeah, and there are characters from all over the town who appreciate it, and this is another one of those how fun it must be to be Hugo Weaving. He again, lots of people seem to be having fun in this film. I think he was having the most fun because for one, his role, I'm going to be fair, doesn't ask a lot of him. We've seen him do heavier lifting in dramatic turns. The role of Sergeant Ferret could have gone other ways, but as far as atonement goes, but he ultimately gets off fairly lightly. But I think he wears that lightness well.
And as you said, the role didn't really ask much of him compared to some of his other roles, but he really did capture that character. He was very convincing, and I forgot it was Hugo Weaving. You're just, like, drawn into the movie. Everyone, pretty much, was really captured their roles.
There is one thing, though, that drew me out, although I've been told that I'm too fussy about it. The main characters, Tilly and Teddy, are supposed to be contemporaries, but for me, the 15-year gap in the actors' ages was hard for me to overcome.
Instead of the roughly 3-year gap there was supposed to be.
Right. Again, no knock to either Kate Winslet, who's just great. I love to see a woman who is both wounded and vulnerable, but also like really at home in her own power. And Tilly certainly is, and Teddy, played by Liam Hemsworth, is just a nice guy, just a really nice guy, and it's not hard to watch a nice guy. Certainly not one from the Hemsworth family. They are very nice. Okay.
I think you might be confusing nice with muscular.
Who's to say? And, I think there's something for everyone here. If you are appreciative of the human form, there's something in this film for just about everybody. So, that's what I want to say about that.
So, would you like to talk about the character of the sergeant more?
I think...
He seemed to play an integral part in many of the scenes.
He was. In some ways he's her strongest ally, and the one whose betrayal was the biggest. I think we've kind of danced around the subject here, but Tilly is in town for revenge. Teddy suggests that she's not going to get it, and whether she does or not, we'll leave for the spoilery portion. And yet Tilly treats Sergeant Ferret with a kind of gentleness, and I'm wondering if it's just a utilitizing kind of, I need to use you for a while, and so I need you close to me, and I will bribe you with whatever, shiny thing I have at the moment. Or is there genuinely I understand how hard it is to be here and to not fit in, and is there sort of a, you did what you did and it hurt me, and but I understand that you ultimately weren't, you were the hand that hurt me, but you weren't the one behind it.
I don't think at the beginning she really understood the full extent of the part he played in it, because later on, she really does go off on him, but then they make up again later.
No, I think she does. I think she just, she's decided to bear it for a while.
The conversation right before she goes off on him makes me think she didn't really know all of it.
Yeah.
I think she found a new piece of information, and then maybe had already let all the other stuff go, but this one new piece of information she hadn't been able to process over the decades yet.
Like I said earlier, I don't think there's a whole lot there.
No.
And I don't think there's, so the character himself, it feels light. And one of the ways that I can tell is how he makes his exit.
Yeah. And we don't even really find out what happens to him.
Well, not that. I feel like we know what happens to him. But I feel like he exits during a portion of the action where bystanders who are ultimately not all that bad exit.
Right.
As opposed to people who, whose uppance comes a bit later.
Something I didn't think of at the time, but just discussing this with you now made me realize her character feels a lot like some of the things that King does in his writing, where this character is representative of the entire town. It's not just her who's been betrayed, it's not just her who's looking for revenge. There's a lot of betrayal going on in this town. There's a lot of revenge that happens.
This is a seriously messed up little town.
And she really feels like she's just one character pulled out to show the extent of everything. in a way.
I was thinking about all of the different influences on this piece.
Mm.
And I think, visually, you've clearly got a lot of homages being made to spaghetti westerns, to, sort of gunslinging movies of the past. I mean, even when the rival shows up, like, her arrival in town was filmed just like a rival gunman showing up, in anything that Clint Eastwood might have starred in his heyday. And there was something about the dustiness of the town and
the good, the bad, and the dressmaker.
Something like that. But I think I also see, like, Agatha Christie in the way that the plot is structured.
Mm-hmm.
In the way that this is, except for sort of two moments where an outside town is brought in, the action of this film takes place in a very closed off, bubble. Almost like a cozy mystery, like where, everyone has come to the manor house for a weekend party and now we're stuck there, kind of. And in the way that the plot will speed up and slow down, feels a little like Christie does to me.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see other influences?
The Western influence was really big. You've mentioned that. It is not a musical by any stretch. There's no songs, but just some of the... Well, actually, there's one song near the end. But it felt like it may have been drawing on musicals also, and a big part of that is because there's a lot of plays that end up going on. Most of it we don't see.
Well, and I was thinking about that... when Tilly begins to dress the town to influence and to find out what she needs to know, and just because that's what she does, she dresses people. They begin to show up in these incredibly vibrant colors, in a way that does sort of feel like some of the classic Hollywood musicals, but also in the film itself they reference South Pacific, they reference Carousel.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually a nod to quite a few sort of classic Broadway musicals of the 50s and 60s.
Mm-hmm. What did you think of the pacing? Was it about right? Too fast? Too slow?
It worked fine for me. This is another one of those, like I said earlier, about as it was clear where we were headed. And it was clear where we were headed from pretty much the introduction of the characters. It still unfolded at a pace that I found pleasurable. How about for you?
This is one of the rare movies where I don't think there was anything wrong with the pacing at all, or scenes that you could have cut and still made the movie enjoyable. I think every scene really was needed to explain fully what was going on. I also don't think there was anything they should have added. I don't feel anything was missing that should have been explained. Pacing and the scenes were really good.
Well, with that, we're gonna pause for a second and be ready to talk about the fifth act after a short break. So in the fifth act, the townspeople have asked Tilly to be their costumer for. Well, actually, I guess we need to go back to the fact that she was just about ready to let them all go,
mm-hmm.
and then Teddy dies.
Mm-hmm.
It's an accident, but it's also sort of the last straw. And the townspeople have asked her to do their costumes for a dramatic contest with the neighboring town.
Right after they've just been exceedingly rude to her.
Incredibly rude. and there is a sort of sense of, we will never forgive you, but we might forget, or we might, like, learn to tolerate you if you continue to be useful to us. And so in that bit, what the play that they're going to do is Macbeth, which is a terrible idea. But earlier in the... She had a copy of... Was it Macbeth or was it Hamlet?
I don't remember.
It's either Macbeth or Hamlet that Teddy picks up off her shelf and sort of quotes too. And so that's two Shakespearean tragedies sort of being slipped into the plot of this movie. And I think just like there are references to all these other, to the musicals, to the spaghetti westerns, I think this is another one of those be looking for the structure of a Shakespearean tragedy at work here. Now, it kind of turns it on its head, because the idea of a Shakespearean tragedy is that the main character has a fatal flaw. Unless you consider perhaps the townspeople to be the main character, and perhaps you can.
Or that death follows her.
Well, I don't know. But the idea is that in the fifth act of a Shakespearean tragedy, all of the uppances are supposed to come. That there is a rectifying of the natural order, and that all that is not right is supposed to be set right, often, to terrible effect. So that you get the duel at the end of Hamlet, wherein the uncle, everybody is just dying on poisoned swords and blah, 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 blah. Or you've got, at the end of, Romeo and Juliet, you've got the death of the star-crossed lovers. At the end of Macbeth, you've got just, it goes on and on. So the point is that here, as it begins to pick up steam after Teddy's death, you get the departure of, as I said, the bystanders. You get the departure of the apothecary's wife. You get the departure of the sergeant. You get the departure of the wife of the mayor. And in all of these, they play a role. They have played a role, but they've also been victims.
The departure of the mother also.
Yeah. And Teddy's family, who were always sort of a permanent underclass for this town. So they were going to be in a world of hurt anyway, because without Teddy's family, they had no one left to deal with their septic systems. So, but you've got the departure of all of these forces. They go first. They're bit by bit by bit. They're shown out either because, in the school marm is shown a slightly more violent exit, because they all kind of contributed to the situation that Tilly found herself in, but they weren't the main forces that kept things locked in place. And then the next round of people, who are shown their end, the apothecary, the mayor, and then ultimately the town itself, in a fiery conflagration of saying, and yet at the end of it all, Tilly rides away on a train bound for Melbourne to go back to Paris, but she has nothing left to lose. She has lost everything that was meaningful to her. She is now rootless. She's scorched not just the town, but everything, else. And so she's leaving kind of wounded and battered too. And that for me felt so fitting. It did. It was one of those things that oh, okay, I understand. We're gonna do this is a tragedy. We're gonna end, even if it feels like the revenge is complete. It's still a tragic ending. So, as people began to sort of whittle down. It's like you don't have very many characters left by the end of the film. Like, how were you I was experiencing it in this sort of Shakespearean way. How were you experiencing that fifth act?
I really wasn't comparing it to anything outside of just itself. I think it was very fitting that she said she was finally done with her curse, and as a sign of that, and maybe just to make doubly sure, she just razed the town, and just, dusts her hands off and leaves. Yeah. And as you point out, this didn't really help her either, except she was able to let go of it, but she was still, at the end, also kind of broken.
Yeah. And because of the nature of the mystery, where she's trying to figure out, what happened to this boy that she knew as a child, and the circumstances around his death, and how did he come to die, and was she ultimately responsible for it? And the answer, turns out, of course, that no, she's not responsible for it. I mean, not just like physically, because the kid did himself in an improbable accident, but that in so many ways she had been seemingly locked in to a system that was designed to kill her, and she merely said no. And after that, the whole system falls apart. Mm-hmm. Which I think actually is a beautiful bit of family systems theory. So family systems theory says that systems, families, organizations, have a homeostasis, and people have all of their roles to play in that homeostasis. But that all it takes for systemic change to begin is for one person to decline to play their role anymore. Mm-hmm. The problem is, though, and we see it in this film, but we also see it in real life systems, is that systems hate change. Like, they don't want to change their homeostasis, so they will try and do whatever they can do, unconsciously, to get somebody to either step back into their role or to cut off the person who's not playing their role and find somebody else to fill it. Mm-hmm. And I think you kind of see that a little bit in the, there's clearly bullying going on in the group of people who are children. And
the adults.
Well, yes, that too. And the woman reflecting on herself as a child said, damn straight I threw you under the bus. Like, somebody had to be down there, and I didn't want it to be me.
Yeah.
Which is true about bullies. Once a bully has been robbed of their target, they will often move on to another target. And frequently, they will target whoever stopped them from bullying their previous target.
Or just whoever looks weak enough to pick on.
So, yeah, I think... So watching that unfold definitely, left that kind of impression. What did you think of that, the way that it turned out the young man had died? Is that what you... I mean, no one would expect this. This is the part that was totally unexpected for me.
Yes.
For one, I don't think it's fatal. Like, unless he did it just snapped his neck. I don't know. Go watch the film.
Or scrambled his brain.
Come back and tell us. I think he would have, maybe concussed himself. Maybe.
I think he would have noticed the thing that changed from his expectation that ultimately led to his death, and then stopped what he was about to do. But, I mean...
Maybe he was committed. I'd also suggest that this town's representative of the medical field was, not qualified to be that.
I also was thinking, he's hit his head a number of times. It's possible he's just not the brightest person in the...
Too many hits to the old noggin.
But what did I think about it? Other than the fact that it seems a little improbable, not because of what you're saying where you don't think it would have killed him. I think that definitely could have killed him, depending how it went down. I just don't think he would have done it. At the point things changed.
I don't know. So, ultimately I do recommend this film, even as it begins to kind of fall off the rails. at the very, very end. Even the art with which it falls off the rails is enjoyable, and yeah, I think it was a weekend movie for us. It was a fun way to spend a weekend.
Yeah.
And maybe it'll be a fun way to spend a weekend for you. So, last thoughts?
Well, now that you mention it, that seemed improbable, but looking back further, a lot of the townspeople also seemed pretty gullible, and some of that is clearly because they don't want to admit what's going on, but some of it, a few people in a few of the instances, just seem like they would believe, like, the Music Man could come in there, and speaking of musicals earlier, and he would walk out much richer than he came in.
Monorail. All right. Okay, so that is our thoughts, and hopefully you'll check out this film too.
So, please comment in the area below if you have thought of anything we've missed, or if you just had a completely different take on the movie, or if you want to tell us movies that you think we'd enjoy having watched this one.
Yeah, we definitely didn't cover everything in this film. There's a lot that you could still talk to us about on it. Or come and find us over at our website, novitovideo.com. We also post these videos there, and there's a comment section there.
And if you are going to leave comments about with critiques of the movie, please say spoiler, leave several blank lines, and then type it. That way the actual spoiler is below the more line.
So now is the time on No Veto Video when we share with you our veto override recommendation. A movie, or increasingly we seem to be finding it hard to limit ourselves to one movie, maybe two, that we think accompany this film or go off in a slightly different direction. It's just another thing that you can check out that we were thinking of when we watched this film. So what's your override for the week?
My override for the week is Kinky Boots. If you liked following the dressmaking aspect of this, Kinky Boots tells the true story of an English shoe shop that a man inherited from his father that's failing, and finds a way to revive it by diversifying and making boots for the local drag scene.
So my recommendation, I'm gonna make two. This is my week to cheat. I think it's hard to watch this film, especially to watch Hugo Weaving in this film, and not be reminded of the adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which is just amazing, and everyone should probably check that out. Hugo Weaving also stars in that. But my main recommendation for this week is another Australian movie by a beloved Australian filmmaker called Strictly Ballroom. You remember this?
Mm-hmm.
I think it also, like this film does, it talks about what is it like to be just inside while still being an outsider in a very rules-based insular network. And so there was part of me that was feeling, some similarities there. So, yeah, check those out. I think you'll enjoy all three.
And next time on No Veto Video, we'll be watching The Dead 7, which you can find on Amazon Prime.
Thank you for being with us. We enjoy it. I'm going to, one more last plea for comments. Let us know, where you're watching from, if you feel safe posting that. That helps us kind of know who's out there. So thank you. Subscribe. That'll keep you up to date on when new videos come out. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.